I never envisioned my life unfolding like this. As a teenager, I had no interest in business or entrepreneurship. I was a curious kid, obsessed with machines and the way things worked. My father, a mechanical engineer, always had me tinkering with old motors and disassembled clocks. I loved working with my hands, taking things apart just to put them back together again. My original plan had been to follow in his footsteps until I met printing. It happened by chance. My first job was at a small family-run print shop down the street from my childhood home. I started as a delivery boy, running stacks of freshly printed flyers to local businesses, but I was fascinated by the machines, their rhythmic hum, the careful precision of ink on paper. I begged the owner, Mr. Radcliffe, to teach me. Soon, I was threading rolls of paper, aligning plates, mixing ink. The mechanical ballet of it all clicked in a way that no other job ever had. When I was 21, I took a risk. With money saved from years of working at the shop, I bought my first commercial press, an old second-hand Heidelberg that had seen better days. I rented a tiny workshop space and started taking small orders. Business was slow at first, but I pushed forward. Long nights, countless setbacks, and more financial stress than I'd ever experienced, but I kept going. Within a few years, I had a steady client base. By 30, my print shop was profitable. Then came Louise. She was unlike anyone I'd ever met. Sharp, ambitious, breathtakingly beautiful. We fell fast and hard. Our wedding was simple but joyful, a day filled with promises and laughter. We built a life together, and soon our daughters arrived. Carrie, our firstborn, had my drive and hunger for knowledge. Sarah, our youngest, had Louise's charm and wit. For years, I felt like I had everything: a thriving business, a family, a wife I adored. But something changed. I couldn't pinpoint exactly when, but it was gradual. At first, it was small things. Conversations that felt hollow, a shift in her body language when we were together. I ignored it, convincing myself that we were just tired, overworked, caught up in the routine of adulthood. But the distance between us grew. I tried harder, planned date nights, took weekends off, made an effort to be home early. None of it seemed to matter. Work had been relentless. By Friday, one of the factory machines malfunctioned, and I spent the entire day alongside the engineering crew attempting to resolve the issue. By the time we finished, we were all drained, physically and mentally. For over a decade, I had been at the helm of my own printing company, a business I established in the northern suburbs of Sydney, Australia. That night, I eased my car into the garage, stopped the engine, and sank into my seat, utterly spent. Managing a print shop that caters to both commercial and custom projects is no small feat. Life at home hadn't been much easier. Lately, my wife, Louise, my partner for 15 years, seemed emotionally distant. I thrived on affection, gentle touches, kisses, a shared closeness, but she had begun withdrawing. She valued time spent together, and I did my best to provide that. But juggling my demanding work schedule with her emotional needs was a challenge. I'm Cameron Other, 42 years old. Louise and I have 2 daughters. Our eldest, Carrie, is 18, smart, ambitious, and in her 3rd year of engineering school. She plans to join the business after graduation to help design new printing presses. Then there's Sarah, 15, our free spirit. She's just as intelligent, but prefers a relaxed approach to life, spending time with friends or chatting on Discord, rather than focusing on academics. That weekend, both girls were away, Sarah with friends, Carrie with her boyfriend. With the house unusually quiet, I hoped Louise and I could reconnect over drinks in a conversation. After parking my truck, I grabbed my bag and headed to the kitchen. Louise wasn't home. I poured myself a Kraken and Coke, my go-to drink, and put on some soft music. As I sat there, my mind drifted back to the broken machine. Losing $10,000 in revenue was a tough hit in Sydney's competitive market. The sound of heels snapped me out of my thoughts. Louise walked in, stunning, dressed to go out. My breath caught. She placed her small purse on the table, her outfit far more glamorous than usual. "You look amazing," I said, masking my exhaustion. She smiled, but it lacked warmth. "Sorry, Lou," I sighed. "It's been a rough day, and I don't have the energy to go out tonight." Her expression shifted. "That's fine, Cam. I wasn't expecting you to come. That threw me off. We rarely went out separately, and when she did see friends, she never dressed like this." "You weren't." I frowned. "Why are you dressed like we're going on a special date?" She hesitated before meeting my gaze. "Cameron," she started, then faltered. "Are you leaving me?" I asked bluntly. Her eyes widened. "No, of course not." I let out, a bitter laugh pulling away when she reached for me. "Let me guess. You deserve this after raising 2 kids and supporting our family." She looked down at her purse, visibly uncomfortable. "Cam, I've been seeing Roger. It's been a few months." My stomach dropped. Roger Fellworth, the married guy from your office with 3 kids. That Roger?" She nodded, panic flashing in her eyes. "Yes, he's been there for me while you haven't." "Don't give me that," I snapped. "You've been pushing me away for months. At least now I know why." She tried to justify it, but anger surged through me. "You're rationalizing an affair, Louise. Let's not pretend this is something else." She looked, taken aback. "I told you. So it's not cheating?" Roger says. "Roger is lying to you, just like he's lying to his wife." I cut her off. "And yes, it is cheating. I don't agree to it. Have you been with him physically?" She hesitated, then admitted he kissed me. I laughed bitterly, grabbing another drink. "Well, that's that then. We're done." I stepped outside to the back terrace, trying to process everything. After a long, exhausting day, all I wanted was to come home to my wife. Instead, she had already left us in her mind. 5 minutes later, she appeared in the doorway, her voice softer. "Cam, I love you, but I need this. I felt trapped for the past year. Roger understands. It won't be forever. You'll see." I stared at the yard, refusing to look at her. "No, Louise. You should have come to me. I was supposed to be your partner, your best friend. Instead, you turned to someone else and stole my chance to support you. Now, I don't know if I can ever be near you again." She stood still, then spoke, with quiet confidence. "Cameron, you can't leave. Roger says if you do, I can take everything. Half the business, the house, the kids. I could turn them against you." My blood ran cold. "You'd do that to me?" My voice was ice. "You cheat. Threaten me and expect me to accept it." She hesitated. "I didn't want this," she admitted. "But Roger says in court, I'd win. You don't have much of a choice." I stood abruptly, my gaze fixed on the woman I had once loved. "You're a selfish, unfaithful liar," I said, my voice sharp with betrayal. She took a step back, her expression wavering. I pressed on. "You claim to love me, yet you betray me and then have the audacity to blackmail me? You are not the woman I married." "Cam, she faltered, her voice barely a whisper. I forced myself to breathe, steadying the storm inside me. "If you truly love me, then stop this now," I said, my tone firm but weary. "I don't know if we can fix this, but if you end things with Roger and agree to counseling, I'll try to understand. I'll try to forgive you." Her expression hardened. "I'll go to counseling after Roger and I are done. It may take a while, but when we're tired of each other, I'll go." I stiffened. "What about the girls?" "What about them?" she said indifferently. "How do we explain this to them?" My voice was hollow. She sighed. "We don't. We're not breaking up." I stared at her, disbelief washing over me. "You're not making any sense." And what about me? I pressed. While you're with Roger, where does that leave me? She hesitated. What do you mean? Louise, I'm affectionate. You haven't even kissed me in weeks. I don't feel loved anymore. She blinked, as if the thought had never occurred to her. I don't know, she murmured. Roger says I should be his for now, I snapped. To hell with Roger. So that's it? You're throwing me aside for him? Cameron, that's not fair. I cut her off, voice rising. Fair? You're abandoning your own husband for some guy who's cheating on his wife? Louise flinched. I drained my glass and hurled it against the wall. The shattering echoed in the silence, mirroring how I felt inside. Minutes passed before a car horn blared outside. Louise hesitated, then turned and left. I sat there, numb. My phone rang. It was Carrie. Hey, Dad, I forgot my weekend bag. Robbie and I are coming to grab it. She hesitated. Mom's phone went straight to voicemail, so I called you. I exhaled, forcing composure. It's fine, sweetheart. Your mom isn't home, but I'll leave your bag by the door. Silence. Daddy. Her voice was cautious. I froze, cursing myself. I hesitated. Carrie, I'm just having a rough day. Work was hell and your mom and I had a fight. Don't worry about it. Dad, don't lie to me. She wasn't letting it go. Dad, she said firmly, I'll be there soon. When she arrived, she saw it in my face. The pain, the emptiness. She gripped my hands. That damn woman, she muttered. Then out of nowhere, she asked, Dad, doesn't Mom remember the prenup you both signed? When Louise and I married, I was launching my printing business. My parents invested 6 figures, and their lawyers insisted on a prenup. If either spouse cheated, they'd leave with only their clothes and 15% of marital assets. The house, cars, and custody would go to the faithful spouse. My business was never included. I shook my head. I don't think your mom thought this through, sweetheart. She claimed it wasn't cheating because she told me. Carrie scoffed. That doesn't change anything. She's been emotionally unfaithful for months. Sarah and I felt it. We just didn't know. What? A weight settled in my chest. I need to check on Sarah. Carrie squeezed my hands. Dad, don't pretend it's okay. Mom broke something in you today, and I don't know if I'll ever forgive her. She's still your mom, I murmured, but even I didn't sound convinced. Mom or not, what she did was wrong. Carrie softened. I'll talk to Sarah. She already knows something's up. Despite everything, I managed to eat. Talking with Carrie, Robbie, Rose, and Toby made things feel slightly less shattered. Later, Rose pulled me aside. You have an incredible daughter, Cam. Inaudible, she nudged my leg. How are you? And don't lie. I sighed, my chest tight with conflicting emotions. I still love her, but I hate what she did. I want to scream, break something, hurt them both, but I love her. My voice cracked. Rose nodded, her expression unreadable. What's next? Divorce? I said firmly, and the prenup holds. She threatened to take everything to turn the girls against me. Rose exhaled. Cam, you're right, but I can't. Be your therapist. I'm too close to both of you. Tomorrow we'll find you someone. Just know Toby and I are here. I nodded. She's probably inside, keeping Carrie from tearing her mom apart. Despite myself, I'd chuckled. You're probably right. We talked for an hour, anger, betrayal, and the numbness creeping in. When I went inside, Carrie wrapped her arms around me. Are you okay, Daddy? I glanced at Rose, who smiled reassuringly. No, but having you all here helps. We're staying, Carrie, insisted. Robbie nodded. You shouldn't be alone. That night, I showered, tried reading, but my mind raced. Then an idea hit me. I pinged Louise's phone. She was 2 hours away in the Blue Mountains. Screenshot proof. Then I checked our security system. The footage showed everything. Our fight, her confession, her leaving, and on the front camera, Roger stepping out of his BMW, kissing her. She didn't hesitate. I downloaded the footage and emailed my lawyer requesting immediate divorce proceedings. Then my phone rang. Louise. I let it go to voicemail. Moments later, a message popped up. Her voice was controlled. Then a beep. Roger had put the call on speaker. "Cameron, don't do anything stupid. When we're done, we'll talk. You'll do things my way." Roger's smug voice followed. "Step out of line and I'll ruin you. Louise will take everything. Your business, your kids," Louise added. "If you tell anyone, Roger will make sure you lose it all." Roger chuckled. "When Louise is done with me, she'll come back. Just play along." They laughed. The voicemail ended. I stared at my phone, stunned. Any hesitation about divorcing her vanished. I was done. I rewrote my email to my lawyer, ensuring Louise was served at work ASAP. I also asked about suing Roger. Even if it didn't hold up in court, the legal battle alone would be hell for them. Then another thought hit me. I didn't have Roger's wife's contact info, but I'd find it. She deserved to know the truth. I wish I could say taking action helped me sleep. It didn't. By dawn, I gave up. Carrie spotted me in the kitchen and hugged me. "Did you sleep?" I shook my head. "Me neither," she admitted. "How could Mom do this?" We talked, skirting around. The inevitable, until Robbie returned with coffee. I took a sip, savoring the familiar comfort. Carrie and I sighed in unison. Robbie chuckled. "You two are exactly alike." Then he turned serious. "You didn't sleep, did you?" "No. I was dealing with the lawyer when I got a voicemail from Louise." I played it. Carrie clenched her fists. "That woman is not my mother." She was right. By 10, we started wondering where Rose and Toby were. "They said they'd be here by 9, Carrie noted, frowning. Robbie tried calling first his mom, then his dad. No answer. I tried too. Their cells, their house, even the cafe where we usually met. Josie, the cafe owner, confirmed they had picked up food at 8:30, heading to my place. A bad feeling crept in. Something was wrong. I grabbed my keys, ready to go looking. When Robbie's phone rang, he answered. Within seconds, his face turned ashen. He collapsed. Carrie rushed to his side, panicked. I took the phone from Robbie's trembling hands, gripping it tightly. "This is Cameron Other. Who am I speaking to?" A steady but weighty voice responded. "Mr. Other, this is Constable Collins Sharp. I need to inform Robert of a serious accident involving his parents." My chest tightened. "Are Rose and Toby all right?" There was a long pause before Sharp spoke again. "Mr. Other, is Robert able to speak?" I turned to Robbie. He was motionless, barely breathing, his eyes wide with shock. "No," I said, my voice raw. Sharp's tone remained firm. "I need his consent to speak with you." I knelt beside Robbie, gripping his shoulder. "Robbie, say yes, just say yes." His lips barely moved. "Yes," he whispered. Sharp exhaled. At 8:45 this morning, Mr. and Mrs. Gettings' vehicle collided with an out-of-control semi. Their car was destroyed. A sharp gasp came from Carrie. My stomach dropped. Sharp's voice was steady but heavy. "Mrs. Gettings is in surgery. Unfortunately, Mr. Gettings did not survive. The world blurred. Toby was gone. Rose was fighting for her life." I forced myself to swallow my throat tight. "Which hospital?" "Royal North Shore." Sharp paused, then asked, "Will you and Robert be coming?" "Yes," I whispered, gathering details before ending the call. We arrived at the hospital in 30 minutes, bombarding the nurses with questions. How was Rose? Where was Toby's body? Would she survive? What happened to the truck driver? Constable Sharp filled us in. A semi crashed into them, crushing their car. Toby took the full impact, his side obliterated. He died from massive internal injuries. Rose barely survived, suffering a skull fracture, 2 broken legs, and deep wounds. Worst of all, she lost her left arm. Surgeons barely stopped the bleeding. The rest of the day was a blur. Despite his grief, Robbie handled calls. His grandparents, Toby's brother in Brisbane, Rose's family. By the time they arrived, Carrie and I were helping with Toby's pass-away certificate. Sarah came later, hugging Robbie and Carrie. Then she looked up. "Where's Mom?" Carrie and I exchanged a glance. "She's not coming," Carrie said coldly. Sarah turned to me. "Is this Roger's fault?" I stiffened. "What do you know?" Her voice shook. "A few weeks ago, Mom bought lingerie. I asked if it was for you. She got weird, then admitted it was for Roger, that you'd never see it." Carrie's fists clenched. "Why didn't you tell us?" "I didn't." "No how," Sarah whispered. Things were already bad. I avoided her. By the time I figured it out, I couldn't face you both. Tears filled her eyes. "I'm sorry, Dad." I hugged her. "It's not your fault, baby." She sobbed. "If I'd spoken up, maybe Aunt Rose and Uncle Toby would still be." She broke down completely. That night we only left to shower and change. At 4 a.m., Rose was out of surgery, bruised, broken, but alive. She'd be in ICU for days. Doctors needed to monitor for brain damage. Despite his grief, Robbie thanked the surgeons. I had never been prouder of him. If he married Carrie one day, I'd be honored to call him my son-in-law. By afternoon, we planned Toby's funeral. Robbie called their lawyer, preparing for when Rose woke up. Edwina, Rose's mother, arrived, hugging Robbie and then me. She had always treated me like a son. She barely mentioned Louise, but after Carrie caught her up, I noticed her expression darken when no one was looking. That evening, my phone rang nonstop. Distracted, I answered without checking the caller ID. "This is Cameron Other," I said. A sharp voice snapped back. "That's no way to answer your wife." I froze. "I told you not to cause trouble," she continued, her tone laced with warning. "Roger is furious. If you don't shut up, he'll ruin you. Get home now." Louise. Whatever regret she'd shown on Friday had vanished. Now she was arrogant, demanding. I steadied my voice, ice creeping into my tone. "Louise." The room went silent. "Where are you? Where are the girls?" she demanded. Then her voice dropped to a venomous hiss. "If you told them anything, I swear I'll turn them against you." I ended the call mid-sentence. Let her threaten me. By tomorrow, she'd see how fast her lies unraveled. "The hooker is home," I muttered. Sarah exhaled. "Why did you even answer?" She had spent hours apologizing for not telling me sooner, but after hearing everything, she was as furious as Carrie. Earlier, she had looked me in the eye and said, "Dad, in the divorce, I'm living with you. Of course, baby," I promised. Now, as she gave me a knowing look, I realized I had answered Louise out of habit. My phone rang again, Louise. For 10 minutes, she called me, then started calling the girls. Carrie finally had enough. "What?" she snapped. Even from across the room, I heard Louise scolding her tone. Carrie scoffed. "Mom, stop. I have zero interest in talking to a lying, cheating witch right now." I didn't react. Neither did Sarah. "I'm with my family, my dad and sister. We're grieving. Stay out of it." Louise assumed she meant the divorce, unaware of Toby's pass away. Carrie cut her off. "Mom, I'm done. And yes, Dad told us everything. I'm not living with you." Silence. Then a response. Carrie's expression hardened. "You're a hooker, Mom. Dad loved you. We adored you, and you threw it all away for a man who'll drop you the second it's inconvenient." Another pause. "Yes, Sarah knows. She saw it. Dad might forgive you, but Sarah hates you as much as I do." More shouting. Carrie smirked. "Pack your bags, Mom. None of us want you there when we get home." Louise raged. Carrie laughed. "No, I won't. Tell you where we are. Why don't you call Roger?" "Oh, wait, you can't. He's with his wife, the one who has no idea he's a cheating lowlife." Louise sputtered. "Oops, Our flight's boarding. Talk to you. Never, Mom. She hung up. Wrong number, she said. Despite the grief, the room erupted in laughter. Even the nurses chuckled. That night, Edwina left, promising to return in the morning. Sarah and I planned to leave for a few hours while Carrie and Robbie stayed. As we were gathering our things, a nurse approached. She's awake. We exhaled in relief. How is she? I asked. She's out of it, but you can see her soon. For the next hour. We took turns visiting Rose, bandaged, bruised, connected to machines, but the hardest part was the bandaged stump where her arm had been. I sat by her bed, forcing a smile. Hi, Petal, I whispered. I had called her that since childhood, my Rose. You scared us, but I'm glad you're here. She couldn't speak with the breathing tube, but her hazy eyes met mine, silently asking. I shook my head. A tear slipped down her cheek. I stayed, talking softly, telling her how proud I was, how much we loved her, how we'd get through this. When I stepped out, a nurse handed me a tissue. I hadn't realized I was crying. I nodded in thanks and walked down the hall. 1-2 hours later, Sarah and I left exhausted, catching only 3 hours of sleep before driving back. As we pulled into the driveway, we fell silent. A BMW X5 was parked out front. Crap, we muttered. I drove past, made a U-turn, and parked down the street. The curtains shifted. Someone was watching us. Do we go in or leave? Sarah asked. I sighed. We go in, but you head straight to your room, lock the door, and stay out of it. Are you sure? Dad? I can stay. I smiled. Sarah hated confrontation, but she was ready to face Louise. Now we pulled out our phones and hit record. Then we stepped inside. Roger stormed toward us, arrogance radiating. There he is, the little horned hub, he sneered. Ready to apologize before I ruin your life? Sarah stepped forward. Roger flinched. Louise hesitated, likely realizing he'd just pestered a minor, a lawsuit waiting to happen. If you don't mind, Dad, Sarah said flatly. I'm too tired for this. Wake me at 11:30 so we can get back to the hospital. She brushed past them, muttering a hole and hooker under her breath before disappearing into her room. The second her door. Shut! They pounced. You fool! Roger spat. Louise told you not to tell your daughter? He lunged. I held up my phone. I'm recording. It's been rolling since we walked in. Louise paled. Roger sneered. Whatever, doormat. He was taller and heavier, but mostly fat, balding, sagging jowls. I still couldn't fathom why Louise had chosen him. I folded my arms, keeping my voice firm. Louise, I told you not to come here. Can you bring him? Cameron. She started, but Roger cut her off, stepping in close, just inches from me. We warned you, he sneered. Now I'll make your life hell. I met his gaze without flinching. You're not welcome here. And watch your language. My daughter's in the next room, he smirked. So what? She won't say anything, neither will you. Then, without warning, he snatched my phone from my hand, hurled it to the ground, and stomped it to pieces. You're just some nobody printer, he taunted, his voice dripping with condescension. Before I could react, Louise stepped in, her voice cold and deliberate. Roger is 10 times the man you'll ever be, and now that you've told the girls, things will get very hard for you. She leveled me with a glare. Stay quiet or we'll destroy you. I turned to her. Louise, what the hell are you saying? Before she could answer, Roger swung. I moved with the punch, but it still landed hard on my ribs. I staggered back, clutching my side. What the hell? I hissed. You knocked me in my own house, Roger smirked. So what? Louise will back me up. Hell, I could eliminate you and she'd tell the cops you started it. He chuckled darkly. You don't get it, doormat. I'm a lawyer. I make the rules. I control the money that runs this world. He puffed up, basking in his delusion. I take what I want, when I want, and you can't do a damn thing? I turned to Louise, searching for the woman I once loved. "You're really standing by this guy." She hesitated before setting her jaw. "I'm sorry, Cameron, but yes, you're just not a man like him." Her words cut deeper than Roger's punch. I exhaled, letting my last shred of patience burn away. "Then I have nothing left to say. But you both need to leave now." Roger mistook my calm for weakness. He lunged. Big mistake. He swung. I dodged. His momentum sent him stumbling. I tripped him easily, and he crashed straight through the coffee table. Glass shattered. Wood splintered. For a moment. He just lay there, stunned, mouth opening and closing like a gasping fish. Before he could recover, I grabbed his ear and yanked him close. My voice was low, venomous. "You barged into my house thinking you could push me around, but now you're flat on your humiliated. You think you're powerful? I just made you a eunuch." I let him drop with a pathetic thud. Louise gasped, scrambling to his side. "What did you do?" I stared at her and felt nothing. No love, no grief, just cold indifference. "You didn't even ask where we were," I said flatly. "Didn't check on Sarah, didn't wonder why we weren't home. You just stormed in here screaming and threatening while one of our closest friends is dead and another is fighting for her life." Louise's face paled. "Oh, Cameron, you didn't." "No, I didn't." I cut her off. "Carrie and Robbie figured it out. They wanted to be here for me, unlike you. Rose and Toby came over Saturday morning to check on me." I glanced at Roger, still groaning on the floor. "Then they got hit by a semi," I said quietly. "Toby's dead. Rose is in the ICU." I let the silence stretch, watching as the reality of it settled in. Louise's face twisted, not with grief, but with rage. "This isn't my fault, Cameron," she spat. "If you'd just kept your mouth shut, they'd still be alive. This is on you." A quiet but firm voice cut through the tension. "No, it's not, Mom." We both turned. Sarah stood in the doorway, pale but steady. She ignored Roger completely, looking straight at me. "I called the police and an ambulance. They're on their way." Then she turned to Louise. "I don't know who you are anymore, but you're not my mother, and it's your fault Uncle Toby is dead, not Dad's." Her voice cracked, but she pressed on. "And it's my fault, too. Maybe if I had said something sooner, Dad could have stopped it." "Sarah," I started, but she shook her head. "No, Daddy, I should have spoken up, but she..." She pointed at Louise, voice trembling with anger. "Is the one who caused this." She turned and walked away, slamming her door. Sirens filled the air. Police lights flashed through the windows. The second the officers stepped inside, chaos erupted. Louise launched into a dramatic performance, claiming I had attacked Roger. The officers asked if Roger was her husband. She hesitated, then admitted he wasn't, but still insisted I attacked him. Paramedics loaded Roger onto a stretcher, groaning. Theatrically, I calmly explained the situation, but the officers seemed unsure. I had punched Roger, after all. Then Sarah reappeared. "Officer," she said firmly, "I have a recording that proves everything, including the part where this man threatened to eliminate my dad and where my mom said she'd lie to protect him." She held up a USB drive. Louise's face drained of color. Roger muttered. "What?" "Like smashing. Your phone wasn't enough?" Sarah glared. Dad knew something might happen. I left my phone recording outside my door. She turned to the officer. "I don't feel safe around my mom. She said she'd support this man no matter what he did to my dad. He kicked my dad. Please don't make me stay with her." Then she stepped beside me, wrapping her arms around my waist. That sealed it. Sarah, a minor, had evidence. Her testimony destroyed Louise's lies. Minutes later, officers placed Louise in handcuffs and let her outside. She didn't fight, didn't argue, just stared at me. A long, lingering look, but she didn't say a word. Roger was hauled off in an ambulance. Louise was taken to the station. Too wired to sleep, I showered, changed, and made coffee. Then Sarah and I drove to the hospital. When we walked into Rose's room, Carrie and Robbie sat quietly, exhausted. Carrie's eyes widened. "Daddy, what happened?" Her gaze locked onto the bruise forming on my jaw. I told them everything. The fight, the arrest. When I mentioned punching Roger in the balls, Carrie snorted. Robbie outright laughed. Then we heard a sound. We turned. Rose was awake. Her tired eyes met mine. "Rose," I whispered, stepping closer. "Pedal." "I'm so sorry." She couldn't speak, but reached weakly for my hand. I took it gently. "You okay? Need anything?" Blink once for yes, twice for no. She blinked twice, then slowly, 3 times. Her fingers curled weakly around mine, holding on. I didn't let go, and I didn't move for the rest of the night. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Louise's parents bailed her out the next day, but their tirade against me ended quickly when Carrie shut them down, making it clear where she stood. A few days later, Louise returned to work, only to be served divorce papers. As if that wasn't enough, a bailiff delivered legal documents to her office, implicating Roger. By day's end, she was suspended without pay. With nowhere to go, she moved into her parents' spare room. She came by once to pack. Carrie and Robbie stayed to make sure she didn't pull anything. Before she left, Carrie hugged her grandparents but made it clear her mother wasn't welcome. Here again. Carrie was done. Sarah was done. I was done. A week later, doctors removed Rose's breathing tube. Her first words? "Cameron, are you okay?" I froze. "Rose, how can you even ask that?" She smiled weakly. "I'm fine." I shook my head. "Rose, She cut me off, whispering. "I knew about Toby before you told me. We had a few moments before they pulled us from the wreck. He told me he loved me. He knew he wouldn't make it, and I knew I would." Tears slipped down her face. "I remember your eyes confirming it." I took her hand, squeezing gently. She turned slightly, voice low. "I had a dream last night," she murmured. Toby came to me. He looked perfect, whole, healthy, no pain. A soft smile played on her lips. He told me he was okay, that it was his time, and that the accident wasn't anyone's fault, not even Louise's. I stiffened, but she caught it. "I know," she sighed. "That's just like Toby. No blame, just acceptance." She met my gaze. "He told me to take care of you. He loved you like a brother, Cam. He was worried about you." I swallowed hard. "Rose, you're the one who needs taking care of. Have you noticed you're missing an arm?" She chuckled, lifting her bandaged stump. "Guess I'm completely armless now." "Huh," I snorted. "Looks like I'm on duty whenever you need help." She groaned but laughed. "I mean it, Cam. I miss Toby more than words can say. But that dream, it gave me peace, and he made me promise to be there for you." I sighed, holding up my hands in surrender. "Fine, fine, you can take care of me." She grinned. "But only after you get out of here. Until then, I'm in charge." Unlike the chaos of those first weeks, the next few months dragged. If I wasn't working, I was at the hospital. If I wasn't at the hospital, I was packing. The girls and I decided to sell the house. I found a smaller place in North Sydney, close to the medical center. 3 bedrooms, an office, and if you stood on tiptoe in the master bedroom, you could just see Sydney Harbor. Meanwhile, my divorce from Louise was in full swing. The girls refused to speak to her. Every conversation ended in disaster. Sarah, once soft-spoken, became distant at the mere mention of her mother. Carrie practically moved in with Robbie. I didn't object. She was an adult, and after everything, I just wanted her to feel safe. As for Louise, despite her bravado, she was struggling. Stuck in her parents' spare room, suspended from work, she had lost everything. Even after calling me a brainless doormat and a pathetic lover more times than I could count. She wasn't handling the fallout well. Her parents even asked if reconciliation was possible until I sent them the recording. They never brought it up again. Roger fared even worse. After the fight, he had to have one of his testicles removed. He tried to sue me, but the police shut it down. I had a clear self-defense case. His law firm, desperate to avoid scandal, fired him. My lawyer pounced, securing a quiet settlement. Then, as if things couldn't get worse, Roger's wife got a copy of the recording. I swear it wasn't me, but every now and then, I'd catch Sarah smirking. I didn't ask questions. One night, I got a call from Miranda Fellworth. We spoke for over an hour. She had suspected Roger was cheating for years, but now she had proof. And as it turned out, Roger had never owned his wealth, their home, lifestyle. Everything was funded by a trust from Miranda's grandparents. Roger wasn't in the trust. By the last update, I heard he was living in a cheap hotel, maxing out a credit card, jobless, broke, and alone. I hoped it stayed that way. Meanwhile, Rose was getting stronger. A month after the accident, she left the hospital for a few hours. It was time to say goodbye to Toby. The funeral felt surreal. We were all grieving, but Rose was the calmest. She smiled at memories, laughed at old stories, and when she cried, she comforted others. She was still in a wheelchair, her body wrapped in bandages. A deep scar ran across her forehead and down her cheek. Doctors said it might fade or she could opt for surgery. I stayed by her side, pushing her wheelchair. Her nurse lingered nearby but gave me space to care for her. A month later, I was in Rose's hospital room sorting bills when I felt her watching me. I set down my pen. "What's wrong, Petal? Need something?" She didn't answer. Tears streamed down. Her face. I was at her side instantly. She clung to me, sobbing into my chest. I checked the monitors. Her vitals were fine. This was emotional, not physical. The hospital psychiatrist had warned this might happen. From the moment Rose woke up, she had focused on everyone else, never herself. "Shh, Rose," I whispered. "It's okay, I'm here. You're not alone." She sobbed harder but nodded. I miss him, you know." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I know, I miss him too." She clung tighter. "Will it ever stop hurting?" I sighed. "I don't know, but Toby's gone and you're still here. We have the girls. That has to mean something." She was quiet for a moment before relaxing against me. "Thank you, Cam," she murmured. "I don't know if I could have made it through without you." Then, unexpectedly, she kissed me. For a moment, I kissed her back, warmth spreading through me, something deeper than comfort. But then reality set in and I pulled away. "Rose, I'm sorry," I murmured. "You're my best friend, and we're still mourning Toby." She sighed, but didn't let go. "I know, Cam, but I feel something. It never really left after high school." That night's sleep was elusive. Somewhere between waking and dreaming, I found myself in a bar. The crowd blurred, voices murmuring, glasses clinking. And then, among the haze, one figure stood clear. Toby. I froze. He turned, smiling. "Come on, Cam. You can hug me." I did. He felt real, warm, alive. We sat, drinks waiting for us. Kraken and Coke for me, Guinness for him. "So," he said, watching me. "How are you, Cam?" I slumped. "Not great. The divorce is messy. The girls are angry. I'm trying to help Rose, but I'm drowning." Toby nodded. "And what about you and Rose?" I frowned. "What about us?" He raised a brow. "Come on, we've known each other too long for this. You love her." I scoffed. "She was your wife, and I'm dead." He smirked. "You can't cheat on me, Cam. She still has a life to live. And you." He pointed at me. "I've loved her all along." I had no words. He grinned. "I give you my blessing, you idiot." Then he lifted his glass. "Now let's have a drink before you wake up." For what felt like an hour, we played darts, drank, and even sang along with the other blurred figures in the bar. There was one guy in the background watching, overseeing everything, but I couldn't remember his face when I tried. And then the bar started to fade. Toby hugged me. "Thanks for being my friend, Cam. I wanted to hold on, to stay in that moment, but everything went black." When I woke, tears streaked my face. By the time I showered and got dressed, the dream had faded to the back of my mind. At the office, I caught up on reports, checked in with my managers, and went through the usual motions. By lunchtime, I was walking into the hospital. Rose lit up when she saw me. Doctors had finally set a discharge date. She was getting restless, eager to be anywhere but here. We were talking about her return home when Toby's mother, Camille, walked in. I had always liked Camille, though I didn't know her as well as Rose's mom, Edwina. She greeted us warmly. "Rose, you look so much better today. And Cameron, look at you all dressed up." She winked. "Toby would be proud of you." Then I saw them, the yellow sandals. I froze. Rose caught my shift in demeanor immediately. "Cam, what's wrong?" Camille followed my gaze. "Oh, are my shoes weird? I just bought them yesterday. Special order." I swallowed hard. "No, it's—" I hesitated. "Just a dream I had last night." Rose's sharp gaze told me she wasn't going to let it go. Camille, thankfully, was distracted as she set down a bag. "I brought you both lunch. Picked up chicken sandwiches from that little Asian shop in North Harbor. They're the best in the city," I murmured, almost involuntarily. "Chicken sandwiches?" Rose frowned. "Cam, are you okay?" I looked at her, then at Camille, then at the bag, then back at the yellow sandals. It was a dream, I told myself, just a coincidence. I forced myself to eat, even as my hands trembled. And then, just as Toby had predicted, Louise walked in. She looked composed, thinner, but otherwise the same. She held a bouquet of flowers and a wrapped gift, walking in as if the past few months had never happened. "Rose, it's so good to see you," she said, her voice overly bright. "You look wonderful." Then she saw me. Her expression shifted instantly. "Cameron," she growled, "what are you doing here? This is your fault. Rose is in this hospital. Toby is dead, and you have no right to be near her." Her voice turned venomous. "Once I divorce you, I'll make sure Rose never has to see you again." I stood up. The room thickened with tension. Then a thin, tired voice cut through it. "Get out." Everyone turned. Rose was staring out the window, silent tears slipping down her face. Louise faltered. "Rose, No." Rose's voice hardened. "He stays. You leave." Louise's mouth opened, but nothing came out. I stepped forward, voice low and controlled. "Louise, for once in your life, listen. Go." She jumped up, knocking the gift onto the floor. The bouquet followed, smacking against the wall in an explosion of petals. I stepped between her and Rose, blocking her from the woman lying in the hospital bed. Behind me, Camille remained frozen, watching the scene unfold. Louise's voice rose, sharp and shrill. "What the hell, Cameron? What did you tell her?" Her eyes darted between me and Rose, full of paranoia. "She knows this is your fault, doesn't she? She knows you're the reason Toby is dead. Why would she think I had anything to do with it?" Then she turned her attention to Rose, her tone shifting into something almost condescending. You're the one who needs to leave, Cameron. Rose needs someone who actually cares about her." She took a step closer, as if to reach for Rose. "I'll take care of her. She lost her husband, and she needs real support." Her gaze drifted downward, finally landing on Rose's bandaged stump. For a brief moment, something flickered across her face. Pity, disgust, maybe even guilt. And then, with a cruel smirk, she sneered. "And if she loses her arm, I'll be happy to take care of her too." My patient snapped. "What the hell do you think you're doing here?" My voice was low. cold, controlled in a way that carried more fury than shouting ever could. You've been silent for 2 months. You didn't visit. You didn't call, and now suddenly you think you have the right to show up. I gestured to Rose. She lost her husband. I lost my best friend. The girls and I have been here every single day. Where the hell have you been, Cameron? Rose murmured, her voice quiet, but firm. I ignored her. I know exactly why you're here, I continued. My glare locked on Louise. You lost your job. Your parents finally got tired of you freeloading in their spare room, and now you think you can weasel your way into Rose's life, manipulate her into taking you in, because that's what you do. You use people until they have nothing left to give you. Cameron Rose's voice came again, a little stronger this time. I was too furious to stop. You're pathetic, Louise. You burned every bridge you had, and now you, Cameron. I turned, ready to keep going, but one look at Rose's face made my anger evaporate. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even surprised. She just looked tired. I exhaled my chest tight. I'm sorry, I muttered. She shook her head. It's okay. Then she turned to Louise, her voice steady. You need to leave. Louise scoffed. Rose, I'm here for you, not him. Rose didn't blink. With the way you've treated Cameron, with the tantrum you just threw, you made something very clear. You are not my friend anymore. Louise's expression twisted in disbelief. You can't be serious. Rose's voice wavered slightly, but her determination remained. And don't you dare blame Cameron for Toby's pass away. That's on you. You cheated. You became someone vile and unrecognizable. I trusted you for years, and now I'm ashamed I ever called you a friend. Louise opened her mouth, but Rose lifted her stump, cutting her off. Leave, Louise, she said coldly. You are not welcome here. If you don't go now, I'll call security. Louise's desperation shifted into something ugly. She looked between me and Rose, her eyes burning with resentment. Her lips curled into a sneer. Well, screw you, Rose. I see how it really is, you hypocritical witch. Camille gasped. Rose inhaled sharply, but she didn't waver. You can shove whatever help I was going to give you up your A, Louise spat. Before she could say another word, I grabbed her arm and dragged her into the hallway. She shrieked, thrashing as I pulled her toward the exit. Hospital staff turned their heads, eyes wide, but I didn't stop. I pushed open the fire doors and shoved her outside. The doors slammed shut behind us. Louise stumbled, but quickly regained her footing. What the hell, Cameron? I stepped closer, my voice dangerously quiet. I don't know what happened to you, I said, barely restraining my anger. I don't know how you went from the woman I love to whatever you are now, but whatever game you're playing, it ends here. Louise blinked, momentarily caught off guard. Cameron? No, Louise, shut up! Her mouth snapped shut. I didn't stop. My voice was cold, unwavering. You destroyed everything. Your daughters want nothing to do with you. Your friends are gone. No one wants you around. You have nothing left. The fire doors burst open. 2 burly security guards stepped out. One of them, Peter, gave me a knowing look. Everything all right, Mr. Other? I nodded. I'm fine, Peter. She was just leaving. Peter turned to Louise, unimpressed. You were just leaving, weren't you, ma'am? Louise's eyes darted between us. Then she forced a smirk. Sure. I'll see you later, Cameron. I shook my head. I hope not. We watched as she stalked away. Once she was gone, the guards escorted me back to Rose's room. Camille was still there, whispering to Rose, but when I walked in, she stood up and hugged me tightly. Thank you, Cameron, she murmured. Now take care of her. She needs you. Then she left, catching the elevator home. I turned to Rose and sat on the edge of her bed. Are you okay? She snorted. Shouldn't I be asking you that? I shrugged. It's been a weird day. I hesitated, but now that Louise is gone, I feel calmer. I ran a hand through my hair. But honestly, I think it started with that dream last night. Rose tilted her head. Dream. I nodded. Yeah. Couldn't sleep, tossed and turned. And then I dreamt about Toby in a pub. Rose's breath hitched. I frowned. It was weird. I knew it was a dream. The place was huge. There were people, but she swallowed hard. Then, barely above a whisper, she finished my sentence. They were blurry. I froze. She met my eyes, and I saw the truth in them. Yeah, I said slowly. Everyone but Toby, and some other guy. I can't remember him, but Toby was clear. We talked. He told me what would happen today. Camille's shoes, the sandwiches, Louise showing up. He knew everything. She squeezed my hand. There was something else. Wasn't there? She asked softly. I nodded. A tear slipped down her cheek. Love, Cameron, all your days, she whispered. My breath caught. Crows, I rasped. How did you? She nodded, another tear falling. Toby's last words before we passed out. The last thing he ever said. My tears joined hers. Toby told me I had to tell you, she whispered. He said you wouldn't be able to ask, but I had to say it out loud. And just like that, we fell into each other's arms. We cried together, mourning the man we had both loved, the friend, the husband, the father. As the evening faded into night, Rose shifted in her hospital bed, making space for me. Without hesitation, I climbed in beside her. We lay together, exhausted, comforted by each other's presence. As we drifted towards sleep, I kissed the top of her head. I love you, Petal. She snorted softly. I love you too, Cam. The next morning, we woke to clapping. Sarah. She stood in the doorway with Carrie and Robbie grinning. Carrie smirked. Well, this is adorable, Sarah giggled. Took you too long enough. I sighed. Good morning, nosy children. Carrie turned to Robbie. Kissed him. Morning, babe. Rose smiled. Then she looked at me. Cam, we have a lot to talk about. And we did. Later that week, we made a decision. Rose wouldn't return to her old apartment. Instead, she moved in with Sarah and me in the new house. Closer to the hospital and to the support she needed, Carrie and Robbie took over Rose's old place, planning to rent out the extra rooms to university students. By the time Rose was discharged, her rigid casts were gone, replaced by removable braces. For the first time since the accident, we truly saw the stump of her left forearm. The skin was healing well, but it was still a painful reminder. Rose had mostly accepted it, though there were moments when the weight of it hit her hard. Coming home was one of the happiest days of her life. Even her doctors, cautious as they had been, assured her she could live a full, normal life, including relationships whenever she felt ready. Of course, the kids had already decided that for us. Instead of placing her things in the guest room, they moved them into the master bedroom with mine. Presumptuous brats, I didn't mind. That evening, after dinner, Carrie and Robbie headed home and Sarah went to a friend's place, giving Rose and me our first real time alone since the hospital. We both knew what it meant. A few weeks later, my divorce from Louise was finalized. The prenup held. She got almost nothing. No stake in my business, no claim on the house. Still, I wrote her a check for $40,000 more than I had to. Why? 2 reasons. 1, she had burned every bridge with us. I wanted her to have enough to leave and never come back. Last I heard, she had taken a job in Wollongong, far enough away to ensure that. 2, money meant nothing to me. It was never about the money. As for Roger, he got desperate when he couldn't find work and started selling pills. In typical Roger fashion, he sold them to an undercover cop. 2-year sentence. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. 6 months later, Rose and I got Married. She was breathtaking in her wedding dress, though she had struggled with insecurity. Losing her arm had left scars deeper than skin. She fought through bouts of depression, but with me and the girls by her side, she never stayed down for long. She found purpose after finishing her psychology degree. She became a counselor, specializing in helping amputees adjust to their new reality. 2 years later, on Australia Day, she was honored for her contributions. During her speech, she called me on stage, catching me off guard. "I wouldn't be here without Cameron," she said, looking at me with love that filled every word. He held me up when I couldn't stand, lifted me when I fell, and never let me believe I was less. He loved me through it all. That moment, I'll never forget. From then on, we spoke at conferences, gave interviews, and helped others facing similar struggles. But I was the only one who saw her vulnerable moments, the quiet breakdowns, the nights when frustration, grief, or exhaustion got the best of her. I was always there to catch her. Our love only grew stronger. Sure, we had disagreements, but we never went to bed angry. We had learned the hard way how precious time was. 3 years later, Louise came back into our lives. Carrie and Robbie's wedding. They had graduated, built their careers, and were ready for their future. Carrie hadn't wanted to invite her mother. They had spoken twice in 3 years, both times ending in bitterness. I convinced her otherwise, not for Louise's sake, but for Carrie's. I didn't want my daughter looking back one day, wondering if she should have given her mother a chance. Carrie agreed, with conditions. Louise would be seated with the general. Guests, not the family. I shrugged. As long as she wasn't near me or Rose, I didn't care. So a compromise was made. Louise sat with her elderly parents, who were more than happy to stay far from the family table. Like any man dealing with an ex at his daughter's wedding, I found myself at the bar, ordering a Kraken and Coke. It wasn't on the official menu, but I was paying for the wedding, so I drank what I damn well wanted. That's when Louise appeared beside me. She leaned against the bar, ordered a glass of white wine, and spoke without looking at me. I never asked for forgiveness, did I? It wasn't a question. "No," I said, simply not bothering to look at her. Instead, I watched Rose and the girls at the far end of the room. They were laughing, truly happy. Warmth spread through me. Then I turned slightly. "But I never expected you to." Louise sighed. "You're right." She swirled her wine, her voice soft, almost wistful. "I wasn't myself back then. I was a mess." "Uh-huh." I took a slow sip of my drink. Across the room, Rose caught my eye. She smiled, then frowned slightly when she saw who was beside me. I shook my head, signaling that it wasn't a big deal. She nodded in understanding. Louise followed my gaze. "I saw you both at the Australia Day Awards," she admitted. "I followed what you've done since then." She watched as Rose laughed with our daughters, a bond she would never be part of again. "They hate me," she whispered. "They all do, don't they?" I exhaled. Hate is a strong word. Then I smirked. "No, actually, it's the perfect word." She flinched. "But time softens things," I added. "Maybe in 10-15 years they'll call you." I felt rather than saw her shoulders slump. Then she turned to me. "What about you?" Her voice was quiet. "Do you hate me?" I shrugged. Hate, loathe, despise. I took another sip. "Take your pick." The band was tuning their instruments. Soon I'd dance with my daughter. Louise studied me for a moment. "But you convinced Carrie to invite me if you hate me so much." "Why?" I finally turned to her, really looking at her for the first time all night. She was hollow. The years had not been kind. Her hair was over-dyed, brittle. Her skin was sallow, her posture hunched as if regret weighed her down. This wasn't the woman I had loved. This was someone broken. I studied her a moment longer before speaking. No mother should miss her daughter's wedding, I said, even if she was a disgrace. Her lips parted slightly in shock, but she didn't protest. But I didn't invite you for you, I continued. I did it so our daughter wouldn't have regrets. I turned back to my drink. That's all. I looked at her one last time, my voice firm. And if I never have to see you again, I'll consider myself a happy man. With that, I walked away. As I reached my family, I heard her whisper behind me, "I'm sorry, but it was too late." We danced, we laughed, we celebrated Carrie and Robbie's love, and I never saw Louise again. Years later, she died. We found out through her parents just before Sarah's engagement, a sudden complication from an ovarian cyst. She passed in a hospital bed alone, with only her parents there. She never reached out, never tried. She simply faded away. But our story continued. Rose and I built a life. We traveled, spoiled our grandchildren, and eventually our great-grandchildren. We filled our days with love and laughter, making memories that stretched across generations. Through it all, Rose and I never wavered. When I looked at her, I didn't see the years that had passed. I didn't see wrinkles or silver hair. I saw the girl I had loved at 18, the woman I had married at 40, the mischievous grandmother who, even at 82, could still make my heart race with just a smile. And in that moment, I knew. I was lucky, I was loved, and I would be until the very end.